So what do we mean when we talk about diversity? How we define diversity is different for every organization, and it's critically important that every organization have this conversation. Questions to consider during this conversation include, is our board representative of our local population and the population the organization serves? Are there a diversity of races, ethnicities, ages, genders, sexual orientations, religions, and other visible and invisible aspects of identity represented? Do we have a diversity of skill sets, areas of expertise, socioeconomic status, levels of education, and geographic locations at the table? And lastly, what perspectives are missing? One piece that's important to note here is the temptation to avoid talking about race specifically in these conversations. While race can be an uncomfortable topic for many, I've often found that racial disparities are some of the biggest barriers for organizations. One of the foundations for creating more diverse boards and more vibrant communities and organizations is to recognize and work to change historical and current marginalization, especially based on race and ethnicity. So I encourage organizations to have these challenging conversations, and if you don't feel comfortable having them, consider hiring someone to help you do so. So what are some of the barriers and challenges to board diversity? There are lots of reasons that boards tend to be homogeneous, from resistance of long-standing board members to historical and organizational structures. Implicit bias, or the tendency of our brains to categorize people into groups and make judgments about them without even knowing it, is likely one of the many reasons that our boards and organizations are less diverse than they should be. In very simple terms, our implicit bias is based on how we've been socialized. We tend to favor people who look and act like we do, and we tend to have different and more stringent expectations for people who seem different than us. Microaggressions, which are brief, commonplace slights based on some aspects of a person's identity, and often made unintentionally, are another way that we might unknowingly create board environments that are unwelcoming people from backgrounds that are different than our own. Learning more about implicit bias and microaggressions can provide a good foundation for thinking differently about your organization. Based on those topics, boards often start to take a second look at their unexamined structures and practices, including things like the times, structure, and location for board meetings, how board members are recruited, whose voices are prioritized at meetings, and how new board members are welcomed. What are some key steps organizations can take to diversify their boards? There are dozens of steps boards can take as they work to diversify, but here are a few good starting points. First and foremost, recognize that diversity often means changing historical and cultural aspects of the organization. It requires dedication, buy-in at all levels, openness to change, and yes, some resources. Change isn't always easy, but the benefits can be huge. As I mentioned, boards may benefit from trainings or workshops that help them further understand, discuss, and define diversity. Workshops about implicit bias, microaggressions, or racial equity might help boards get to know each other while also developing shared language and values around the topic of diversity. Many boards decide to develop a diversity policy statement, which articulates the reasons that diversity is important to the board's or to the organization's mission. This can also be an important way to engage the larger organization in these conversations. Consider looking at the data for your organization. Look at the characteristics and the demographics of your board members or of your organization. What skills and perspectives are missing? How might you go about finding people with these skills and perspectives? Examine your board recruitment process. Consider bringing on new board members in cohorts of 2 or more. Make sure you are recruiting new board members for their skill set, not because they help you check a diversity box. Build in structures that remove potential for bias, such as drafting board member job descriptions, utilizing multiple methods for outreach, and implementing an interview process. Think about how you're going to keep these new board members around. Do they feel welcome? Do they know what their job is? Do they have a voice at the table? A new board member orientation, an annual board evaluation, and clear meeting structures are good ways to do this. Finally, educate yourself. There are lots of resources out there, and this is work that takes time and commitment. Talk to organizations who have already started the process. Find experts in the field who can help you, and be committed enough to put some financial resources into this effort.